Authorities say there is an increasing number of threats against lawmakers and law enforcement since the FBI raided former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate.
That's right. And this comes as new reports say an informant may have tipped off the FBI ahead of Monday's search. The Wall Street Journal and Newsweek report the person told the FBI Mr. Trump was not truthful about what he took from the White House. That person also reportedly claimed to know where the documents were and what they contained. The former president faces several legal battles. On Wednesday, Mr. Trump invoked the Fifth during a civil deposition as part of a New York State investigation into his business practices. He also faces a separate criminal probe into his company in Manhattan and another in Fulton County, Georgia, for allegedly trying to overturn the state's 2020 election results. FBI Director Christopher Wray says the increased threats by those upset about the investigations are concerning.
Violence against law enforcement is not the answer, no matter what anybody's upset about or who they're upset with. And I think we have in this country had over the last few years an alarming rise in violence against law enforcement.
He called those threats dangerous and deplorable. For more, let's bring in CBS News Chief National Affairs and Justice Correspondent, my friend Jeff Pegues. Jeff, it's always good to see you. As we mentioned, Newsweek and the Wall Street Journal are reporting that a mole in former President Trump's camp tipped off the feds ahead of Monday's raid. We spoke with a Newsweek reporter earlier today. Let's first hear what he had to say and come back to you.
I think we know a lot less about what it is that exactly is that the FBI knew and what they were looking for. And that's where the confidential human source comes in, that in fact, somebody in the Trump camp was aware of the fact that President Trump kept a safe, and that in that safe were documents that perhaps he was not going to return, even as after this whole tussle between the National Archives and the Trump White House had been resolved. And that, to me, is the basis for which we saw the raid on Monday.
Jeff, have officials told you anything about being tipped off by someone on Trump's camp? And what could this mean for the former president?
Really good reporting by the Wall Street Journal as well as Newsweek. We have not confirmed that information at this time, but, you know, it clearly is the kind of information that will certainly raise eyebrows in the Trump camp, if you will. The fact that somebody on the inside is cooperating with investigators. You know, if you're on the wrong side of an FBI investigation, that's not the kind of information that you want to hear. But perhaps, you know, with all this pressure on the Justice Department and the FBI to say something, specifically coming from Republicans who want to put the DOJ on the hot seat here, frankly, by revealing some of the details of an investigation, which is something that the Department of Justice does not do. Of course, there was that time in 2016 with James Comey, but the Department of Justice, the FBI, is trying to forget what happened in 2016, trying to change course here and not talk about open investigations. But what, you know, this Newsweek Wall Street Journal report reveals, at least for me, when I look at it, is, boy, what does or did former President Trump have in that safe?
Right.
Question, you know, could it be communications with Russia or with the Chinese premier? You know, what could it be? Conversations with Saudi Arabia's leaders? You know, what is so sensitive for the former president that it's something they're reluctant to sort of turn over to investigators? That's what I want to know.
Well,
perhaps we'll find out at some point soon.
I think a lot of people want to know that as well. But getting back to your earlier point, Jeff, about whether or not this is going to become too politicized, as we know, former President Trump's core supporters are showing no signs of backing away from the embattled GOP leader.
It's already become
If
politicized.
anything, right. But it's already becoming to a point, though. I wonder whether you can address these increasing number of threats being made against law enforcement or anyone who is not perceived to be aligned with former President Trump. Even in some cases, we're seeing some language, harsh language, coming out of the mouths of lawmakers themselves.
Yeah, I mean, threats against journalists, threats against lawmakers, threats against the FBI, and these are vile threats. You know, it's the kind of thing that we can't play on television without beeping it out, beep, 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 all over the place because, you know, as I said, these are vile threats. But look at the atmosphere. You have on Monday the former president saying that this was a raid, occupation, what is going on with the FBI, yada, yada, yada. You have his supporters weighing in from Capitol Hill, accusing the FBI and the Department of Justice of the kind of tactics that we don't typically see in this country. So the rhetoric is just sort of rev things up. And there's always, as we saw with January 6th, there's always an audience for this kind of thing. You know, in fact, the anti-government movement in this country has been growing over the years, and that's something that the former FBI or the current FBI director and others have been pointing to as a domestic threat here, is people who don't believe in the government, who don't believe in the FBI and the laws of this country, who, you know, you have police officers at the local level facing off with these kind of people who don't think that they should be stopped. And so the rhetoric that we've heard this week have sort of really ramped things up.
There's a concern that rhetoric is just ratcheting up things to a dangerous
it's
level.
And yeah.
Jeff Pegues, thank you so much.